Hi folks, my name is Colin Lee. I work for Meetup, doing Android code and Kotlin Multiplatform. For those unfamiliar, Meetup has about 60 plus million members, and they run groups for the purpose of, say, shared interests like hiking or photography or whatever. You can go there, start your own group, and get lots of people who will then come and join your Meetup event. And I'm going to talk to you today about how we started using KMM at Meetup. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I am going to say, how we chose KMM, obviously. I'm going to dive in a little bit on how it makes our lives better as developers. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's next for Kotlin and Kotlin Multiplatform at Meetup. So let's dive in. How we chose KMM. Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile, for those not in the know. At Meetup, we had a plan to start developing a second app. We've had this app for all of our members for many, many years that was kind of legacy, had a lot of stuff going on, had layers on layers of new technologies, all the way from butter knife all the way up to, an ArcsJava and you name it, all sorts of stuff, right? Just all packed in one package. And we wanted to build something custom and special for our organizers who, let's face it, are doing a lot of work. They're tireless people putting on lots of effort into running their hiking groups, their whatever they do. We appreciate them, and we wanted to give them their own app that does things better for what they need. So we started building something that looks kind of like this. This is an early version, I think. But we had these designs in mind, and we're like, okay, we have this problem we've had over the years that we build things twice. We build things for Android, we build things for iOS. At the end of the day, you end up with these platform-specific bugs, which don't always get caught by QA. They go out the door. Suddenly you find out that on iOS in this weird edge case, users are dropping off and you don't know why, and you had to go in this long investigation, and KMM was our answer to this. So a long time ago, galaxy far, far away. You don't have to read this whole scroll. I'm just had to be silly. The point is that as a team, we decided we needed to do something. We wanted to make our lives better as developers, and we knew there could be some friction. Clearly, we're trying to use Kotlin with a group of iOS developers who are not as familiar. They like their Swift. My laptop is going nuts, but it'll be okay. Anyway, so we decided more shared code is a good thing. It's going to make our lives better. It's going to make our product more resilient, right? And fewer platform bugs would be amazing. Having the fewer cases where people are falling off, crashing, anything like that, even just having user interface elements that are hard to use. We wanted to make everything as shared as we could, right? So it all started as a mob session. This isn't actually Midjourney. This isn't a live photo. When iOS developers get together, they grow extra fingers. Kidding. But no, we had a mob session, and it was great. I will say that it was a little crazy because at the time we didn't plan for it as well as we could have. One of our first lessons from this talk today is take meal breaks and plan them. Because what happened was, over the course of the day, we got a lot done. But people were dropping off like flies. People are human. They need to eat. They need to hit the bathroom. They need to be able to participate. And so we should have definitely had real breaks in our mobbing. But by the end of this mob session, we had something spectacular. We had done mob sessions before. We did it for Jetpack Compose, where we planned, hey, we're going to do a mob session. By the end of this, we're going to have a widget of some sort written in Compose. And at that point in time, I didn't know it, and neither did anyone else. It was actually impossible, because the Android platform team had not yet figured out a way to do this. So we had a mob session, and it went spectacularly well. By the end of it, we were pulling data off of our API from GraphQL and showing the exact same thing on both apps, which is as good as you can expect from 6 hours of people falling off and still trying to push through. Also trying to fight, because in iOS, you'd hit the run button and it wouldn't actually run, and you'd have to jump over to Xcode. And yeah, when we started this like 2 years ago, KMM has grown in leaps and bounds. Kotlin Multiplatform has grown in leaps and bounds. And it worked. We hit GraphQL, we got real data. This was a great success that said, hey, maybe we should keep looking into this technology. It's not just something to play with. Maybe we need to be a little serious. So our mob session led to getting a single engineer starting on a prototype. And there's my favorite Zoom background these days. It was me. I was the first engineer working on it because I had started on KMM the longest ago, back in 2017. Not because I'm like an amazing coder, but because I'd been exposed the earliest. And so I set out to start building real screens and flows and creating something more than just a prototype, more than just a mob session thing. So first off, we had to figure out where we're going to make this split. Because obviously, before today, if you didn't work at JetBrains, you couldn't write your entire UI in Compose and just have it run on iOS. So you had to make a decision, and there were a lot of factors going into this thing. There's this thing called the view model, and it has different meanings depending on what you're referring to. In MVVM, which is model view model, it's an architecture style, but it's not referring to an Android X view model nor an iOS view model. It's referring to a concept completely different that has no bearing with the others. So we actually mapped it out like this. We were like, we're going to have everything up until the platform view model, even pushing the UI states up to the platform view model. And that's how we're going to build this thing. So our prototype then led to building a team of 4 engineers. We did eventually start doing a rotation so everyone could get a chance to play with this. But initially, it was just a team of 2 Android, 2 iOS. With the 4 engineers, we actually released a beta. We had got some pretty awesome stuff out there pretty fast. And then our 2 intrepid iOS engineers got together. They went back to their iOS collective where they talk about the newest and greatest in iOS technology. And what happened was panic, mass panic. So what happened? Our 2 engineers on iOS were excellent, and they actually really liked working in KMM, but they had some gripes, reasonable ones, about how Objective-C was the interface and not Swift. And so they were telling the other engineers not that there was anything wrong with KMM. They actually liked working in it, but they were being honest about the pluses, the minuses, what the state was, and what they were contending with. And what happened was some of the engineers were kind of a little bit set back, and some of the engineers were, oh my God, this is the end of my time working on this thing. This is going to kill my involvement here. Lesson number 2, persuading people is better. You can't really force anyone to do anything. I mean, the worst case isn't that somebody quits. The worst case is somebody maliciously complies. What you really want is you want to win over people who are going to be working on your code. You don't want to bring Kotlin in as a cudgel and say, hey, we want this because it's easy for the Android devs or something. You want it to be something that is meaningful for other reasons. And today, our iOS devs are actually, they're all on board. Not only that, they're the ones really driving the wholesale adoption. So I'll get into that later. But so what my manager did to deal, there was one engineer in particular, I'm not going to name any names, because I don't even know, to be honest. I can just guess, but I'm not going to. There was one engineer in particular who had worked on a React Native project and had a terrible experience where the company got a year and a half, 2 years in, decided it was a complete failure, decided to roll it all back bit by bit, trying to unwrap and unravel this project. So he took a little convincing, and my manager sat him down and said, let's do a thought experiment. Just imagine what the worst case could be. It probably sounds really bad to you, but let's just role play. Reality will likely be better. also, imagining that worst case, it's not really that bad. As a company, we're smaller, we're agile. We can, I think Meetup's only like 80 some employees, I don't have the current number. But it's, the idea was that the worst case isn't actually that bad. If you can reason with them by treating them like human beings, by reaching out to them, you're going to have good results. And so this person eventually came around, and the whole team is on board now. So lesson number 3, treat your iOS developers well. We have had amazing success because we have such good iOS developers. I'm going to say even with Compose for iOS, which is a big deal, you still want your iOS developers. Here's why. They're going to know the issues with the App Store. They're going to know the issues with the phones, the devices, all those things. Having an iOS developer who knows Kotlin is worth its weight in gold. So treat them well. KMM Libraries that make our lives better. I'm going to talk about the first Kotlin Conf. I don't know who was there. Hands? Oh, wow, we got a few. Okay. This was in San Francisco in 2017. This is when they announced the first Kotlin Multiplatform, during the keynote. I don't know if anyone remembers the keynote, but there were like a little alarm bells going off, like beeping. And I thought it was just something annoying thing from somebody's phone. Turns out it was actually the carbon monoxide detectors. So maybe in some version of the multiverse, multi-platform could have just been snuffed out by some iOS dev. In the end, they ended up opening the back garage doors and letting some air in, and it all worked itself out. And here we are today. But my point is, back then it was a very different ecosystem. The entire experience back then of writing Kotlin multiplatform was built around expect and actual. This may be a review for a lot of people because we've been listening to multiplatform talks all week, the whole time so far, but I'll just run through it quickly. In the beginning, Kotlin multiplatform was expect and actual, and expect creates the interface, actual provides the implementation. The idea then is that you can write code that uses the interface, and you can also write the code for each platform. So you're writing all the code twice still, but at least you can use it in a place where there's shared code. Great stuff. However, you're still writing code twice. So KMM Libraries handle the actual platform code so you don't have to. The reason why Kotlin Multiplatform is so huge today is not just because it's a few years later. It's because the ecosystem has grown in so many ways, in so many amazing libraries. And that's largely what I'm going to be talking about today. The other thing was, in the early days, the memory manager was hard. You could work around the problems a lot by just making something thread local or putting everything on the main thread in iOS, but it was a pain if you had to do anything advanced, let's say. The new memory manager is easy. And a lot of these things that were major like growing pains and learning for people, they're just melted away. So KMM today is looking really, really bright. Let's talk about multi-platform libraries. I'm going to start with Apollo GraphQL. GraphQL is a very misleading term. If you're not familiar with it, it's not a graphing database. It's referring to, it was Facebook who came up with GraphQL in the first place, or Meta, or whatever they're calling themselves today. And they created it because they wanted to put the graph on one kind of middleware that you could access with a single request. And you could then create your own custom request for any given screen on any client, and it'll satisfy it with only one response. And that's a very powerful thing as a client developer. What I've found over the last 2 years of writing KMM is that of all the libraries I've worked with, Apollo GraphQL probably has the highest quality integration. I don't know if that's still true today, but it's been true for a while. If you're looking to do things across a network, it's just something very powerful, but only having to make one request and not having 1 out of 6 timeout and have your whole screen messed up. So I highly recommend if you can use GraphQL, it's not as bad as you might think. Also, Ktor. So Ktor is, at the time when we started out, there weren't a lot of REST clients for KMM. And it's actually written by JetBrains, so I feel bad saying it, but I had some config headaches early on. But it's still probably the best for REST, as far as we know. The problem was that in the configuration block, there would be certain like custom plugins that you might want to use for various purposes, like say, I want to persist my OAuth keys somewhere. So I can, it's somewhere secure, right, in encrypted storage. And things like that would actually just break because they were written, the library plugin was written in a way that was only working for a single platform. So KTOR, I think, has grown a lot. It's gotten a lot better. But I feel like Apollo is still a stronger integration if you can. Yeah, we're trying to go towards full GraphQL for everything right now. We're very close. SQL Delight. So this is actually, it was written by Square or Cash App or whatever they are now. And one thing about Square is they've always done good libraries over the years, and this is no exception. You write SQL queries, actual queries, and it just generates the code the same way that Apollo would generate the code for your graph queries. And this one actually supports Android, iOS, JVM, and actually JavaScript. So you can go pretty wide with your multi-platform here. Mocha resources. So Mocha, all of those libraries are by a company called IceRock. And they in the early days of KMM, they tried to do a lot of libraries. I feel like they might have overextended a little, but they did a good job. However, Mocha Resources has been a major success for us. Our iOS developers are used to a pretty bad situation when it comes to string handling, and using Mocha Resources has made their lives easier rather than something that is a painful integration, which is really good to hear. It's not only strings, I think it does like drawables and a whole bunch of things, plurals. It's got a nice long list. I haven't tried all of them, so I can't vouch for those. I did hear several issues over the early on. They didn't handle fallbacks for iOS to, like, say, whatever language you use as your primary, which just kind of sucks because translators take vacation, and then you don't have a translation for one given string, and then it just shows nothing, or the string key, or anyway. There's a couple of minor issues we've had over the time, but generally speaking, this has been a major plus for our organization. Yeah, we love it. Kotlin X date time. What I'll say about Kotlin X, there really wasn't a good date library for multi-platform at the time, so this is the only option. It does a really good job with date math because it's basically JSR 310 for KMM. The downside is it doesn't really do I18N right now. If you're trying to do format specifiers and translate them, and you want things to look right across every country, you're going to have to do it yourself, basically. And we've had to do that, and it's not ideal because people get a substandard experience. In the beginning, they said they were never going to handle it. Today, they're saying that it's coming. So I fingers crossed. Kotlin X serialization. This one's great. It serializes a lot of formats, works JVM, JS native. Basically, this is what would replace your JSON or your Moshi, and I would say it's as good, if not better, than a lot of those options. It's one of the better supported Kotlin X libraries, I'd say. Multi-platform settings. If you missed the talk earlier today, you can always go back in time and try not to mute yourself and cause a grandfather paradox and go watch that talk. And but you can also watch it on YouTube. Persist key value pairs. It'll save to shared preferences, NS user defaults, which are like the Apple iOS equivalent. It also does encrypted shared preferences and keychain for iOS, which is great because we all have to save our OAuth keys somewhere. And Jetpack now also has a competing library, data store for KMM. I can't vouch for the new one. I assume it's good quality, but either one was probably a decent option. Yeah. Multi-platform paging. So this is complicated because two library vendors picked the same name. One 4 or 5 years ago, well, maybe not that long, and the other one earlier this year. The new one is from Square, so it's probably very good, but the old one's been around a long time, so they both, I try both, see how you feel about them. and they're both called multi-platform paging. So yeah, give it a shot. Paging is something that's always been very painful for a lot of developers, I feel like, on native mobile. So this uses Android X paging on Android. I can't remember what the equivalent for iOS is called, but it's okay. In the beginning, there wasn't really more than one dependency injection. You either had to roll your own, or you used Coin. And that's not a bad thing, because it's easy to use. Like, Coin has never been a really bad option. I feel like maybe Dagger gets a really good reputation for its performance and all the good things it brings, but then the learning curve on it for a lot of people is very painful. I've seen a lot of developers who never learned Dagger in spite of trying for years. So Coin isn't too bad, and it's getting better. There was a talk for this as well. Again, don't run into yourself and cause a paradox. Kermit. Kermit is another one of the TouchLab libraries, and TouchLab, if you probably have heard by this point, is an independent contractor that's kind of big within the KMM universe. So it handles your Crashlytics crash data. It also does what Timber does in not logging stuff you don't want to production, which is nice. You know, it's basic library, but it's useful. KMP native coroutines. This is really cool. It allows you to use flows on iOS with cancellation, because the ones that are built in right now to KMM don't have a good cancellation method. It also does generics and protocols, which is something that also isn't baked into the, it's not context receivers. I'm not going to remember the name of the thing that they use, but it's, this is adding features you don't get with stock KMM. Skie, S-K-I-E, is actually a paid version by TouchLab, and I'm going to get a little bit more into that on the next slide. Moco K-Swift. This converts seal classes on Android and Kotlin into Swift enums. What's funny is that those are kind of conceptually almost the same thing. They work very similarly. They have the same strength. They're not like Kotlin enums, right? They're more like seal classes. But Mocha K-Swift is an open source version. It worked okay for us at the beginning. The generation was a little funny in the naming and all that. But what really hurt us a lot was it actually, at one point in time, conflicted directly with KMP native coroutines, and we ended up having to rip it out. So maybe here, TouchLab Skie also handles this, and it does the coroutines piece as well. So if you have the money and you want to go with the TouchLab route, that might be an easier option potentially. Or you can try to go through the issues and figure out how to fix the open source. Yeah. So what's up next for Kotlin at Meetup? Currently, we have 4 apps, and we're going towards one library. Actually, we have a shared library already integrated that goes into all of our apps right now. And it's providing all the things that are new that we're creating at the moment. We have the campsite rule. It's all going in the new shared library. We just met a few weeks ago, and we're at this point now where everyone agrees it's all going toward KMM. Everything that's a string goes into one base strings area. Everything goes together into one library. Second thing, we've gone from having a version library artifact, which is kind of annoying because if you're trying to update the library and the client, then you have to update the version and build and go through a whole process, to a monorepo. So now we're a monorepo situation where anytime you do a build, you're getting everything. It all just works. So the final lesson for my talk here right now is that today, all app engineers at Meetup are writing Kotlin code. And this has been just amazing for us. It's really refreshing to see that people have come on board and they're believers now. I'm just hoping that with the Meetup for iOS thing that we're going to continue to treat our iOS developers as well as they deserve, because this has been great. We're very happy, and I can take tons of questions about it. But before that, I got a quick little bonus. A lot of people are releasing open source at this conference, and I, as part of this project last year, built something in 2-3 weeks because nothing existed. We needed a description editor for all the events that people are putting up as Meetup organizers. And we wanted rich text, so we wanted Markdown. At this point, I think even maybe now, there weren't any like markdown editors written in Jetpack Compose. So I got together with myself, told my boss, yes, there's something for iOS or something for web, we've got nothing for Android. Wrote it myself in about 2 to 3 weeks based on Mark 1, and I actually used just an edit text because I had to save time. So unfortunately, this won't be like Kotlin Multiplatform available just yet. That'll be like a version 2 maybe, but it's called here, Markdown Twain, and it's really nice, just a syntax highlighting Compose editor, and maybe at some point I'll get it to multi-platform. Yeah, but. Keep going here. We'll take some questions. Right back there. Yeah, there's a mic. Just coming.
How has the transition been going into a monorepo?
Monorepo was tricky. I think the hardest part was converting all of the CI and automation at once. And then trying to, it's one of those things where you slam everything together and then everything breaks. And then you try to figure out, well, where are all the leaks? Where's this water coming from? And we're still honestly fixing some leaks, but I would say we're at a point where we have a lot less manual processes than we did when we started.
And has this been harder on your iOS devs by any chance?
I think generally things tend to be a little harder on iOS. I don't think it's been that bad, though. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Hi. Nowadays, are you considering Compose multi-platform at some point? And you mentioned like everyone on the app are using Kotlin now. Mm-hmm. What about backend?
What about backend? Yes. Okay, that's 2 questions. I'll see if I can get to both at once, or in order. The first question, I'll repeat again, is that he wants to know, are we considering Compose multi-platform now that that's a thing? Obviously, this is brand new information. I kind of knew it was coming because I heard some whisperings and such. But I think it's important to like let our developers know that we value them. And it's not about like we want everybody to immediately jump into writing Compose for iOS. Because it's going to take time for that to stabilize. There's like the garbage collection stuff to work on. There's a lot of issues. And then also, there's a lot of people who came in and they want to write Swift. I think in the short term, we have to just understand that this is a fluid situation and that we need to make a decision over a period of time based on where the technology lies. And the second part of your question, sorry, what was it again? It's real fast. If you have Kotlin backend. Oh, Kotlin backend, yes. So this is a very funny thing. Meetup has had like, I want to say 5 or 6 or 7 technologies over 20 years now. And so there's like Scala, there's Java, there's like Next.js, lots of stuff. And we're always trying to pull things forward to the next thing. So trying to add Kotlin into that mix right now is a lot harder than than doing it when they're in a good state and things are not so fluid, I guess. Does that make sense? It's a challenge. I like the idea myself, but I'm not working on the back end. I'm on the apps team. So yeah. Another question?
Yeah. So I was wondering if you've seen a reduction of bugs in the different apps that share the code, and also if you've seen increase of development speed.
Yes. Yes, we've seen a reduction in bugs. Yes, we've seen an increase in development speed. It's been, obviously, not all types of bugs are going to be fixed by this. The top of our stack, our views are still entirely written in platform code, which means like like if you specify a width or a height of something, it can break on one platform, not the other. With that said, like having the shared business logic has resulted in a reduction in bugs because we notice things faster if they break on both platforms at once. We fix them faster. We have people, we can write better testing knowing that our business logic is only needs to be written as tests once. We have a lot of value in that sense that our shared code is really like important to everyone. and gets more attention.
Amazing talk. And my question about Swift, how much Swift left in Meetup after the migration?
Sorry, what was that?
How much of the Swift code base left inside of the Meetup app after the migration?
So that's a good question. First off, keep in mind we have our legacy apps, which are, I don't want to call them legacy apps because we're trying to bring them over to the modern present. But they have so much code that it's going to take a long, long effort to take all the old stuff like butter knife and whatever, rip it out, throw it away, Jota time, you name it. So yes, there's a lot of Swift code remaining, but on our Meetup for Organizers app specifically, all of the business code is written in KMM, and all of the UI from there at that point up is Swift. Yeah. Go ahead. Oh, okay, yeah, Mike.
Yeah, great talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
About your architecture, I was curious about the two view models.
Yes.
You had a view model for the platform and a view model for the
Architecture.
common code. I mean, how's that working for you?
It's working well. So here's the thing. It's Android X has a concept of a view model, and iOS has a concept of a view model. And it's not the same thing as MVVM view models. So when you're talking about MVVM, you're talking about all your data models are turned into something that's a representation of what will end up on the screen. We do all of that inside KMM. But what happens in our Android X view model is largely just like a wrapping. It's really just there because the platform needs it so that when you rotate the screen, things rotate correctly, that kind of stuff. So we do have to have that separation. We could have done Moco MVVM, which is a third-party open source library from iStrock. However, because of our problems in the past with having low-level libraries that don't interact well together, we didn't want to add too many things at once. We wanted something that was fully fleshed out before, that we felt confident in. So we did it this way.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry, Mike's got to come back.
Did KMM stuff add a significant portion of app size to your iOS apps?
That's a good question. So I'll repeat it. Does KMM add a significant portion of app size to your iOS? I don't actually know the answer, and I'm sorry, I don't know. I do know that the performance has been very good on both apps. We've seen, like the apps are way faster than both of our Meetup for Members apps are, almost across the board. Yeah.
Hello. So first of all, thanks for the very useful talk.
Thank you.
But just being inspired by previous talk of failing implementing Compose in one of the company, what can we do wrong in order to fail migration to Kotlin Multiplatform? Like, what would be your things to watch for, not to do when you're doing a migration to the Compose? To the KMM.
So that's a good question. What things to watch out for when doing integration to KMM? I think one of the really tricky things, like I said, that we ran into was when you start throwing lots of very low-level compiler plugins into your project, you start to get into a situation where you can't upgrade libraries anymore. Case in point, Compose is tied to versions of Kotlin. Kotlin is tied. Some of these things are tied to versions of coroutines, and then suddenly those things become tied to versions of KMP native coroutines, and then you get Moco K-Swift and Moco MVVM in that mix. A lot of those things don't play very nicely when it comes time to upgrade. So you have to very carefully select, what things are really, really valuable that are going to make your team more productive and not hold you back and then make it so you're going to be waiting months to upgrade your version of Compose, which actually happened. Yep. Yeah, that's the biggest thing I would say is watch out for throwing too many compiler plugins into the mix. Yeah. Absolutely. And actually, we're now Gradle Enterprise customers too, so that's been very nice as well, having the build scans with all the data and being able to remote caching, all that good stuff. Yeah, they'll appreciate the plug. Another question?
Yeah, what do you use for testing?
Okay, I'll repeat the question. What do we use for testing? So that's also a very good question, because when it comes to KMM, there are things that, like mocking, for example, are not, you can't use the things you're used to using. Like, say, that's what I'm thinking of. Mach-K. Mach-K is, so the trick with Mach-K to test KMM code is you can test on the Android side, specifically testing the KMM code itself, just in the like Android common module, and that works with Mach-K, but you can't actually test the iOS side. So theoretically it could blow up, but it seems good enough most of the time. And we've done that, and I want to get to something better. I know there's like other frameworks like Mockative, and there's people, I feel like Mach-K is eventually going to get there, or there'll be a better framework that springs up that everybody likes. But that's just mocking. There's a lot of other things. We're mostly using JUnit, Mach-K, all the standard stuff. I do love, oh, I can remember names now, am I? There's a particular assertions framework in a big tests thing. The co-test assertions is wonderful. If you haven't worked with co-test assertions, it has a ton of assertions for things like data classes and coroutines, all these sorts of things, so that you don't have to, you could say, you know, like match this data class exactly except for these properties, or match this data class with only these properties, and then it'll do the kind of matching. And that's just one example out of thousands. It's a really powerful library. But mostly we have a pretty standard testing, and it's, like I said, most of it is actually on the Android side for KMM right now because of Mach-K. Yeah. Another question? Okay.
Can you speak just a little bit more to that boundary between KMM and the native app? Like,
Yes.
what kind of use state do you feel is the appropriate boundary?
So he's asking, what is the appropriate boundary between KMM and the client app? I mean, obviously this is going to change with like Compose Multiplatform and all of that, maybe at someday. But today, with our current setup that we believe in, what we have is anything that's view state comes out of KMM. So, but there's more to it than that, because, for example, if you have Mocha resources for internationalized strings, it's going to expose string desks, and you don't want to be matching this artificial concept. So you end up having to expose both. You end up exposing the UI state and exposing some enums, for example, so that you have some good way to do logic on the clients. So it actually ends up being both exposing UI state and exposing a little bit of the lower level, which, you know, some people would argue that's not a good thing, but I think it is, because we're not matching strings. You know, that's not a good thing to be doing. Yeah. I guess we're good. I guess one more question, and then we're going to go off and have some drinks.
Thank you very much for the great talk. My question is, what do you do when you can't find a KMM library that satisfies the need? Do you write, for example, the Kotlin native and try to import the UI kit or the foundation and just implement the things yourself?
That's a good question. So yeah, I guess you all heard the question because it was on the mic. Essentially what he's saying, how do we implement it if there's no library that works in KMM itself? And then we're back to essentially expect an actual. And it works pretty well, actually. The expect an actual thing was never bad. It was just the fact that you didn't have the convenience of writing the code once. So in the case of, for example, that Markdown editor, iOS had a perfectly good Markdown editor written in Swift, but we had to then write our own for Android. And then that just gets exposed through an expect an actual framework. We can have an interface, call it, things work. So yeah, we don't end up having a problem because it's not part of a KMM library. The KMM libraries just save us time and energy where we can. Yeah, absolutely, cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out.